Most of your suffering doesn't come from what happens to you. It comes from how you react to what happens to you. Someone says something harsh. A driver cuts you off. A colleague takes credit for your work. A family member criticizes your choices. None of these events in themselves have the power to disturb your peace, but your reaction to them does. Your interpretation, your emotional response, that's where the suffering originates. Not in the event, in your relationship to the event. Think about this carefully. Two people experience the same situation. Someone makes a rude comment. One person becomes angry, dwells on it for hours, feels their day ruined. The other person barely notices, remains calm, continues with their day unaffected. Same tone, same intent, completely different emotional outcomes. Why? Because one person gave the comment power over their inner state. The other didn't. This reveals something profound. Events don't control your emotions. People don't control your emotions. You control your emotions through how you interpret and respond to events and people. Most people never realize this. They go through life believing that anger, irritation, and offense are automatic responses to certain behaviors. Someone does something offensive, so of course you're offended. Someone acts disrespectfully, so naturally you're angry. But this is backwards. The behavior doesn't create the emotion. Your interpretation of the behavior creates the emotion. And if your interpretation creates the emotion, then you can choose different interpretations. You can train different responses. You can develop the capacity to remain calm, centered, and unbothered regardless of what others say or do. Not by suppressing emotions, not by pretending nothing affects you, but by genuinely shifting how you process external events so they no longer have power over your internal state. This is emotional mastery, and it's one of the most valuable skills you can develop. Because when you master your emotional responses, you reclaim power you've been unconsciously giving away your entire life. You stop being controlled by other people's moods, opinions, and behaviors. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become someone who remains steady regardless of circumstances. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to develop this mastery, how to train your mind to remain calm when others expect you to be angry, how to stay centered when situations are chaotic, how to be unbothered when people try to provoke you. This isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming emotionally sovereign, in control, free. Let me start by showing you what you're losing every time you allow anger, irritation, or offense to control you. Because most people don't realize the cost of emotional reactivity. They think getting angry is natural, standing up for themselves, being authentic. But emotional reactions, especially anger, come with hidden costs that accumulate over time and destroy more than they protect. First, anger drains your energy. Think about the last time you were genuinely angry. How did you feel afterward? Exhausted, depleted, because anger is energetically expensive. It floods your system with stress hormones. It hijacks your nervous system. It consumes mental and physical resources. And after the anger passes, you're left depleted, less capable, less clear. You spent energy on an emotional reaction that produced no positive outcome. Second, anger clouds your judgment. When you're angry, you can't think clearly. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thought and decision-making, becomes less active. Your amygdala, the emotional center, takes over. This is why people say things they regret when angry, make decisions they wouldn't normally make, act in ways that contradict their values. Anger literally reduces your cognitive capacity. Third, irritation and offense weaken your personal power. Every time you allow someone else's words or actions to disturb your peace, you're giving them control over you. You're saying, your behavior determines my emotional state. You have power over my inner world. This is a profound loss of sovereignty. You've made yourself dependent on external circumstances for internal stability, and that dependency makes you weak. Fourth, chronic emotional reactivity damages relationships. When you're easily offended, quick to anger, constantly irritated, people around you walk on eggshells. They can't be honest because they're afraid of your reaction. They can't be themselves because they're managing your emotions. This creates distance, resentment, superficial connections instead of deep ones. Your reactivity pushes people away. Fifth, emotional reactions prevent you from seeing clearly. When you're angry at someone, you can't understand them. You can't see their perspective. You can't recognize their pain or fear that might be driving their behavior. You're trapped in your own emotional response, which blinds you to reality. And this blindness prevents learning, growth, and genuine connection. These costs accumulate silently, day after day, year after year. You think you're standing up for yourself by getting angry, but you're actually weakening yourself, draining your energy, clouding your judgment, giving power away, damaging relationships, remaining blind, all while believing you're being strong. Real strength is different. Real strength is remaining calm when provocation is present, staying centered when chaos surrounds you, being unbothered when others are trying to bother you. This calmness isn't weakness. It's discipline. It's mastery. It's power that doesn't need to announce itself because it's so fundamentally grounded. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. I once observed a man in a business meeting who embodied this principle perfectly. The meeting was tense. A major project had failed. Millions of dollars lost. Everyone was looking for someone to blame, and one person in the room was loudly insisting that this man, I'll call him James, was responsible. The accusations were harsh, personal, designed to provoke. Everyone in the room tensed, waiting for James to defend himself, to get angry, to fight back. But James did something unexpected. He remained completely calm. His posture didn't change. His voice didn't rise. His face showed no anger or defensiveness. He simply listened. When the accuser finished, James paused. Then he spoke quietly and clearly. He acknowledged what had gone wrong. He explained his role without defensiveness. He asked what could be learned. He suggested steps forward. The room changed immediately. The tension dissipated. The accuser, who had been building momentum for a fight, had nothing to fight against. James' calmness had diffused the entire situation. More importantly, everyone in that room saw who had real authority, not the person shouting accusations, the person remaining calm under pressure. James told me later that staying calm wasn't natural for him. It was trained. For years, he would have reacted with anger to accusations like that. He would have defended himself aggressively. And every time he did, he lost respect, lost credibility, lost power. So he trained himself differently. He practiced pausing before responding. He trained his mind to observe provocations without reacting. He developed the capacity to remain centered regardless of external pressure. That training paid dividends far beyond that one meeting. James became known as someone who could handle pressure, who didn't lose composure, who could be trusted in difficult situations. This reputation opened doors, created opportunities, built influence, all because he mastered something most people never even attempt: emotional self-control. Now contrast James with someone I'll call Rachel. Rachel was talented, hardworking, capable, but she was emotionally reactive. If someone criticized her work, she got defensive. If someone questioned her decisions, she got angry. If someone received recognition she thought she deserved, she became bitter. Her emotional reactions were constant and visible. Rachel's reactivity destroyed her career progression. Not because she wasn't competent, she was, but because no one wanted to promote someone who couldn't handle emotional challenges. Leaders need to remain calm under pressure. Rachel proved repeatedly that she couldn't, so opportunities went to others. People stopped giving her honest feedback because they didn't want to deal with her reactions. She became isolated, stuck, bitter about it, which only made her more reactive. The tragedy is Rachel didn't see the pattern. She blamed others, the unfair boss, the jealous colleagues, the discriminatory system. She never recognized that her emotional reactions were creating the very obstacles she complained about. She never took responsibility for her inner state, so she never changed it, and her career and relationships suffered accordingly. What's the difference between James and Rachel? Not circumstances. Both faced challenges, criticism, and pressure. Not talent. Both were capable. The difference was internal. James trained himself to respond deliberately. Rachel reacted instinctively. James controlled his interpretations. Rachel let her interpretations control her. James had emotional sovereignty. Rachel gave hers away repeatedly. This pattern repeats everywhere. The people who succeed, who build strong relationships, who maintain peace and clarity, they're not people who face fewer challenges. They're people who respond to challenges differently. They've trained emotional discipline. They've mastered their internal reactions. They've learned to remain unbothered when others would be disturbed. So how does this work? What's actually happening when someone masters their emotional responses? Let me explain the mechanics. First, understand that anger is a learned response, not an unavoidable instinct. You weren't born angry. You learned anger. As a child, you observed anger around you. You experienced situations where anger seemed justified or effective. Your brain created associations. This type of situation should produce anger. This behavior deserves an angry response. These associations became automatic. Now, when similar situations arise, anger appears without conscious choice. But automatic doesn't mean unchangeable. What was learned can be unlearned. New responses can be trained. The key is recognizing that anger is optional. It feels mandatory because it's habitual, but it's not. You can encounter the exact same trigger and choose a different response. This requires awareness. You must notice the moment when anger begins to rise, before it fully activates. In that moment, you have choice. Most people never notice that moment. They're angry before they realize what happened. But with practice, you can catch it earlier. And in that early awareness, you can choose differently. Second, most offense comes from interpretation, not intent. Someone says something. You feel offended. You assume they intended to offend you. But consider this. They might not have intended offense at all. They might have been thoughtless, distracted, coming from their own pain or insecurity. Their words might have nothing to do with you and everything to do with their internal state. Or consider that their words might be true feedback, delivered poorly. You're reacting to the delivery while missing the content. Or that their criticism reveals their own limitations, not yours. Or that what feels like a personal attack is actually general frustration that you happen to be receiving. The point is, your interpretation creates the offense. The words themselves are just sounds, vibrations in air. You assign meaning. You decide whether those words have power over you. And if you're assigning meaning that creates suffering, you can assign different meaning that doesn't. This isn't denial. It's not pretending hurtful words aren't hurtful. It's recognizing that hurt only occurs when you accept a particular interpretation. Change the interpretation, and the hurt disappears. This is the foundation of emotional freedom, realizing that interpretation is choice, and choice means power. Third, emotional reactions give power away to others. Think about what happens when someone makes you angry. You didn't choose to be angry. Their behavior triggered an automatic response in you, which means they controlled your emotional state. They did something. You reacted. They had power. You didn't. Now extend this pattern. If multiple people can trigger anger in you throughout your day, you're constantly giving power to others. Your emotional state is determined by external events and behaviors. You're not sovereign. You're reactive. Your inner peace depends on others behaving correctly, which means you'll never have consistent inner peace because you can't control others. But when you develop the capacity to remain calm regardless of others' behavior, you reclaim that power. Someone tries to provoke you. You remain steady. They have no power over your emotional state. You're not dependent on their behavior for your peace. You're emotionally sovereign, self-determined, free. Fourth, detachment restores clarity and authority. Detachment doesn't mean not caring. It means not being controlled. You can care deeply about outcomes without being emotionally reactive to setbacks. You can value relationships without being disturbed by others' moods. You can pursue goals passionately without being devastated by obstacles. This detachment creates clarity. When you're not emotionally entangled with every situation, you see more clearly. You recognize patterns. You understand motivations. You make better decisions. You respond more effectively. Emotional reactions cloud perception. Detachment clears it. Detachment also creates natural authority. People respect those who remain calm under pressure, who don't get rattled, who maintain composure when others are losing theirs. This respect isn't demanded. It's naturally given to those who demonstrate emotional mastery. Because everyone recognizes, consciously or unconsciously, that emotional control is a form of strength. Fifth, calmness is a trained mental habit. This is crucial to understand. You're not trying to suppress emotions. You're training new responses. The way you train any skill, through repetition, through practice, through conscious effort over time until new patterns become automatic. Initially, remaining calm when you'd normally react with anger requires significant effort. You have to notice the trigger. Interrupt the automatic response. Choose a different reaction. This feels unnatural, forced. But with repetition, it becomes easier. The new neural pathways strengthen. The old patterns weaken. Eventually, calmness becomes your default response. Not because you're suppressing anger, but because you've genuinely rewired how you process provocative situations. This training is not quick. It takes months of consistent practice, but it's absolutely achievable. Your brain is plastic, changeable. What you practice, you become. If you practice reacting with anger, you become someone who's easily angered. If you practice responding with calm, you become someone who's naturally calm. The choice is yours. But you must choose deliberately and practice consistently. Now here's something most people never realize. Right now in your daily life, you're unknowingly giving others control over your inner state. Not occasionally, constantly, multiple times per day. Every time you allow someone's words to upset you. Every time you let someone's behavior irritate you. Every time you feel offended by someone's opinion, you're handing them control of your emotions. Most people go through life completely unaware of this. They think emotional reactions are just how life is. Someone does something offensive. You feel offended, that's just natural. But it's not natural, it's trained. And it's a form of bondage. You've made your inner peace dependent on others behaving the way you want them to behave, which they won't. Which means you're constantly disturbed, constantly reactive, constantly at the mercy of external circumstances. But here's what changes when you develop emotional mastery. You realize that no one can disturb your peace without your permission, not because you're better than others, but because you've trained your mind differently. You've learned to interpret situations without automatically assigning meaning that creates suffering. You've developed the capacity to observe without immediately reacting. You've built emotional sovereignty. This doesn't happen accidentally. It requires deliberate training. Let me show you exactly how to develop this capacity. First, observe your emotional triggers without reacting immediately. This is the foundational practice. Throughout your day, notice what provokes emotional reactions. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Feel the anger rising. But instead of expressing it or dwelling on it, just observe it. Notice the physical sensations, the thoughts, the urge to react. But don't act on that urge, just watch it. This creates space between stimulus and response. In that space you have power. Most people go directly from trigger to reaction with no awareness of what's happening. But when you observe the trigger, you interrupt the automatic pattern. You create the possibility of choosing differently. Practice this constantly. When someone says something that would normally upset you, pause. Notice the upset beginning. Watch it without feeding it. You're training awareness, the ability to see your emotional reactions forming before they fully activate. This awareness is the foundation of all emotional mastery. Second, pause and reinterpret events before responding. When something provocative occurs, your mind immediately assigns meaning. They did that to hurt me. They're disrespecting me. They think I'm incompetent. These interpretations feel like facts, but they're just your mind's instant analysis, and that analysis is often wrong, so pause. Before you respond based on your initial interpretation, consider alternatives. Maybe they're having a terrible day and their behavior has nothing to do with you. Maybe they're insecure and lashing out from their own pain. Maybe what you interpreted as an attack was actually clumsy communication. Maybe they're right and you're being defensive. This reinterpretation isn't denial. It's mental flexibility, recognizing that your first interpretation might not be accurate. And even if it is accurate, choosing an interpretation that doesn't create suffering. Someone did something rude. You can interpret that as a personal attack that requires angry response. Or you can interpret it as their problem that doesn't need to affect your peace. Both interpretations might be valid, but one creates suffering. The other doesn't. Third, detach your self-worth from others' opinions or behavior. This is critical. Much of your emotional reactivity comes from taking things personally. When someone criticizes you, you feel your worth is being attacked. When someone treats you poorly, you feel diminished. But your worth isn't determined by others' opinions or treatment. It's inherent, unchangeable. When you genuinely internalize this, others' behavior loses its power. Someone thinks you're incompetent. That's their opinion. It doesn't change your actual competence or worth. Someone treats you disrespectfully. That reveals their character, not your value. Someone is angry at you. That's their emotional state, not a reflection of who you are. This detachment is incredibly liberating. You stop needing others to validate you. You stop being hurt by others' judgments. You stop reacting emotionally to behavior that has nothing to do with your actual worth. You become stable, grounded, unbothered. Practice this by reminding yourself regularly. Other people's behavior is about them, not you. Their opinions don't define you. Their moods don't control you. You are separate from their projections, judgments, and emotional states. This is an arrogance. It's healthy boundaries. It's recognizing where you end and others begin. Fourth, practice responding deliberately instead of reacting instinctively. Reacting is automatic. Responding is chosen. When something provokes you, your instinct is to react immediately, to defend, to attack, to express upset. But immediate reaction is usually regretted later, because it comes from emotion, not wisdom. Train yourself to pause. When something provocative occurs, take a breath. Count to 3. Create even a small gap between stimulus and response. In that gap, choose how you want to respond. Not how you feel like responding, how you want to respond, based on your values, your goals, the person you're trying to become. This might mean responding with calm questions instead of angry accusations. It might mean saying nothing when you'd normally argue. It might mean acknowledging truth in criticism instead of defending. It might mean removing yourself from the situation instead of engaging. The specific response matters less than the fact that you chose it. Your training agency, the capacity to act according to will rather than impulse. This is true freedom. Not being controlled by automatic emotional reactions, being guided by conscious choice. Fifth, reinforce emotional discipline through daily reflection. Each evening, review your day. When did you maintain emotional control? When did you lose it? What triggered reactions? How could you respond differently next time? This reflection builds awareness and accelerates learning. Also acknowledge progress. When you remained calm in a situation that would have previously upset you, recognize that. Celebrate it internally. You're reinforcing the new pattern. You're teaching your brain that emotional control is valuable and achievable. Be patient with yourself. You'll fail repeatedly. You'll react when you meant to respond. You'll get angry when you wanted to stay calm. This is normal. You're retraining decades of conditioning. It takes time. But every instance where you catch yourself, where you pause, where you choose differently, you're building the capacity. And over time, those instances accumulate into genuine transformation. These 5 practices are not theoretical. They're practical tools that work if you use them consistently. But they require commitment. You can't practice occasionally and expect mastery. You must practice daily, in small situations and large, when it's easy and when it's difficult, over weeks and months until new patterns replace old ones. The result of this practice is profound. You become someone who cannot be easily disturbed, not because you're cold or disconnected, but because you're disciplined. You've trained your mind to remain centered regardless of external chaos. You've developed emotional sovereignty that makes you genuinely free. People will notice this change. They'll comment that you're so calm, so unbothered, so steady. They might even be intimidated by it. because your calmness reveals their reactivity. Your emotional control highlights their lack of control. This is natural. Don't let it affect you. You're not trying to make others feel inadequate. You're simply living from a different level of mastery. This mastery will serve you in every area of life. In relationships, you'll stop reacting defensively and start responding wisely. In career, you'll handle pressure and criticism with grace. In conflicts, you'll diffuse tension instead of escalating it. In daily life, you'll move through challenges without being constantly disturbed. You'll reclaim the energy you've been wasting on emotional reactions. You'll think more clearly because anger isn't clouding your judgment. You'll build better relationships because people trust those who are emotionally stable. Most importantly, you'll be free. Free from being controlled by others' behavior. Free from being dependent on external circumstances for internal peace. Free from the exhausting cycle of emotional reactivity. This freedom is available to you, but it requires work. It requires training. It requires commitment to becoming someone different than who you've been. No one can disturb your peace without your permission. Remember this, it's not a nice sentiment. It's literal truth. Your peace is yours to give or withhold. Your emotional state is yours to control or surrender. Your reactions are yours to train or leave automatic. The power is yours. The question is whether you'll claim it. Emotional control is silent strength. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It's simply present. Steady, unshakable. This strength isn't born. It's built through practice, through discipline, through consistent choice to respond rather than react, through training your mind to remain calm when circumstances suggest panic. Calm minds are not weak. They are disciplined. They have done the work most people avoid. They have trained the capacity most people never develop. And because of that training, they possess a form of power that reactive people cannot touch. The power of inner sovereignty. The freedom of emotional self-mastery. This power is available to you, starting now. Not someday when you feel ready, now. Today, in the next situation that would normally upset you, in the next interaction that would typically provoke reaction, you can choose differently. You can pause. You can observe. You can respond with calm instead of reacting with emotion. And if you make that choice repeatedly, if you practice these principles consistently, if you commit to this training fully, you will transform. You will become someone who is genuinely unbothered by what bothers others. Not because you don't care, but because you've mastered yourself. And that mastery is the greatest freedom you can achieve.